She had lived in the same nursing home for 15 years. No visitors ever came. Her file simply read, Eleanor M., until the day she died, when 12 military vehicles lined up outside the nursing home. Welcome to One Human One story. Have you ever met someone who is alone now, but who you once considered to be very important? Let us know in the comments. And if you think these kinds of stories deserve to be heard, click the subscribe button and help us honor those who should not be forgotten. Sunset Gardens nursing home sat in a small Virginia town, housed in an old Victorian-style building that had weathered nearly a century of changing seasons. The 3-story structure contained 30 beds and was usually full to capacity. While some elderly residents eagerly awaited regular visits from their children and grandchildren, others lived as if completely forgotten by the world outside. Eleanor Mitchell belonged decidedly to the second group. Eleanor was 68 years old, average height, with silver-gray hair that she kept neatly pulled back in a simple bun. Her quiet demeanor and preference for solitude had earned her a reputation among staff as pleasant but distant. When she arrived at the nursing home 15 years earlier, she carried only a small, well-worn leather suitcase and a single-framed photograph. The photo showed a young woman in pilot gear standing beside an F-16 fighter jet, her hand resting confidently on the aircraft's wing. Staff members assumed the photograph was from Eleanor's youth, perhaps a memento from a career in aviation support or military administration. But no one pressed for details. Dr. Michael Thompson, the nursing home's director and chief physician, had been able to gather surprisingly little information about Eleanor's background when he processed her admission paperwork. Her official documents were frustratingly incomplete, containing only a standard state identification card and basic Medicare documentation. There were no emergency contacts listed, no family members to notify, no detailed medical history beyond the basics. When Dr. Thompson gently inquired about her past, Eleanor's responses were polite, but firmly limited. "I have a life I left behind," she would simply say, her voice carrying a finality that discouraged further questions. "Now I'm here. And that's what matters." Eleanor's room on the second floor was spartanly furnished, reflecting both the institution's modest budget and her own apparent preference for simplicity. Besides the old photograph hanging prominently on the wall facing her bed, she owned few personal belongings. Her small bookshelf contained perhaps a dozen volumes, most of them appearing to be in Russian or other Eastern European languages, which struck the staff as unusual, but not particularly noteworthy. A small wooden sewing box sat on her dresser, alongside an old-fashioned radio that she listened to each evening. Every morning, Eleanor would wake precisely at dawn, dress methodically, and take solitary walks through the nursing home's modest garden, following the same route with military precision. Nurse Sarah Williams was the staff member who had developed the closest relationship with Eleanor over the years. A compassionate woman in her early 40s with 2 teenage children of her own, Sarah had a natural empathy for elderly residents who seemed isolated from family connections. "Eleanor," she would say warmly during her daily rounds, "don't you have any family? Any relatives who might want to visit?" When Eleanor heard this question, which Sarah asked periodically despite knowing it made her patient uncomfortable, a barely perceptible spark would appear in the older woman's pale blue eyes. Then she would shake her head with what seemed like genuine sadness. "There were some once," she would reply quietly, "but now there's only me. Everyone else is gone." As the years accumulated, Eleanor's health began a gradual but noticeable decline. She developed heart problems that left her occasionally short of breath, especially after her morning walks. Her appetite decreased, and she lost weight steadily despite the kitchen staff's efforts to prepare meals she might find appealing. During routine medical examinations, Dr. Thompson noticed that Eleanor bore several old scars that suggested a more physically demanding past than her quiet demeanor indicated. When he asked about them, she would dismiss his questions with vague references to accidents or old injuries from when I was younger. The facility's doctors said her deteriorating condition was consistent with her advanced age and the natural wearing down of her body's systems. But Eleanor faced these developments with a remarkable calm that impressed everyone who knew her. One particularly significant incident occurred when Maria Santos, a diligent cleaning staff member who had worked at Sunset Gardens for over a decade, was thoroughly cleaning Eleanor's room during one of the residents' rare trips to the local medical clinic. While moving furniture to vacuum underneath, Maria discovered an old metal box wedged far under Eleanor's bed, almost against the back wall, where it would normally be invisible. The box was roughly the size of a shoebox, but much heavier, made of what appeared to be military-grade aluminum with a combination lock securing its contents. Maria's curiosity was naturally piqued, but her professional ethics and genuine respect for Eleanor prevented her from attempting to open it or even mentioning its existence to other staff members. She carefully returned the box to its hiding place, but couldn't stop wondering what secrets it might contain. Eleanor's daily routine had become increasingly important to her as her health declined. She maintained the same schedule with almost obsessive precision, waking at 5:30 a.m., personal hygiene until 6 o'clock, breakfast alone at a corner table in the dining room, followed by her garden walk, then reading or listening to a radio until lunch. Afternoons were typically spent in the common room, though she rarely participated in group activities or conversations with other residents. Instead, she would sit by the large window that faced the main road, appearing to watch traffic, but actually observing patterns and details with an intensity that would have surprised anyone who understood what she was really doing. The other residents at Sunset Gardens had mixed reactions to Eleanor's solitary nature. Some, particularly the more gregarious women who organized informal social groups, found her standoffishness puzzling and occasionally irritating. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, who lived in the adjacent room, had complained to Dr. Thompson on several occasions that Eleanor was unfriendly and too serious for her own good. She couldn't understand why anyone would choose to be alone when there were opportunities for companionship and shared activities. But a small group of residents, particularly the men who had served in various branches of the military during their younger years, sensed something familiar and compelling in Eleanor's bearing and behavior. Frank Martinez, a 72-year-old Army veteran who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, had always suspected there was far more to Eleanor than her carefully maintained facade revealed. "She carries herself like someone who used to be in command," he told his daughter during one of her weekly visits. "The way she walks, the way her eyes are always moving, always watching everything around her. That's not something you lose, even when you get old and sick. That kind of awareness becomes part of who you are." Frank had tried on several occasions to engage Eleanor in conversations about military service, but she had politely deflected his attempts with the same gentle firmness she used to discourage all personal inquiries. Eleanor's health took a more serious turn during her final months at Sunset Gardens. Her heart condition worsened significantly, requiring medication adjustments and more frequent medical monitoring. Dr. Thompson suggested that she might be more comfortable in a facility with enhanced cardiac care capabilities, but Eleanor firmly refused to consider transferring. Her breathing became labored even with minimal exertion, and she was forced to abandon her cherished morning walks around the garden. Instead, she would sit by her window for hours, gazing out at the world beyond, with an expression that mixed nostalgia with something that might have been longing. During this period, Eleanor began what appeared to be a systematic process of giving away her few possessions to staff members and fellow residents. To Maria, the cleaning woman who had discovered but never mentioned the hidden box, she gave a small Russian-English dictionary, saying only, "Languages are bridges between different worlds. Keep building bridges." To Frank Martinez, she presented a brass compass that she claimed to have owned since her youth, telling him, "True north never changes, even when everything else around you does." These gifts were presented without fanfare or explanation, leaving the recipients touched but puzzled by their significance. One evening in late autumn, as the first frost was beginning to appear on the nursing home's windows, Eleanor summoned Nurse Sarah to her room with unusual urgency. When Sarah arrived, she found Eleanor sitting on the edge of her bed, looking more alert and focused than she had in weeks. "I need to give you something very important," Eleanor said, reaching under her bed to retrieve the metal box that Maria had discovered months earlier. For the first time in Sarah's memory, Eleanor seemed almost agitated, as if wrestling with a decision that carried enormous weight. Eleanor withdrew a small key from a chain around her neck and pressed it into Sarah's palm, closing the nurse's fingers around it firmly. "You must promise me something," she said, her voice carrying an authority that Sarah had never heard before. "After I die, and only after I die, you will open this box. Inside, you'll find things that will explain who I really was. But you must wait until I'm gone. Do you understand?" Sarah wanted to refuse the responsibility, sensing that whatever the box contained would somehow change her understanding of Eleanor forever. But the older woman's intensity made refusal impossible. "This is very important," Eleanor continued. "More important than you can possibly know right now. Promise me." Eleanor's condition deteriorated rapidly over the following weeks. Dr. Thompson recommended hospitalization for more aggressive treatment, but Eleanor opposed the suggestion with surprising vehemence. "I want to die here, in my own bed, in the place that has been my home," she insisted. "I've spent too much of my life in institutional settings. This is where I belong now." Dr. Thompson, recognizing the futility of arguing with a patient who had clearly made peace with her mortality, focused instead on ensuring that Eleanor's final days would be as comfortable and dignified as possible. On a crisp morning in early November, Nurse Sarah arrived for her shift to find that Eleanor had passed away peacefully during the night. She lay in her narrow bed with her hands folded across her chest and a barely perceptible smile on her face, as if she had finally encountered the reunion she had been quietly anticipating for years. Dr. Thompson pronounced her dead at 6:15 a.m., noting in his records that she appeared to have died without struggle or distress, simply failing to wake from what had seemed like normal sleep. The funeral arrangements that Dr. Thompson initiated followed the standard protocol for residents with no known family or next of kin. He contacted a local funeral home to arrange for a simple memorial service, basic cremation, and interment in the municipal cemetery with a modest marker bearing Eleanor's name and dates of birth and death. Sarah, Maria, Frank Martinez, and several other residents and staff members planned to attend what they expected would be a small, quiet ceremony honoring a woman who had lived her final years in virtual anonymity. However, on the morning of the scheduled service, an extraordinary sequence of events began to unfold. At approximately 7:30 a.m., a black Cadillac with government license plates pulled into the nursing home's parking lot. A tall man in an immaculate military dress uniform emerged from the passenger seat and walked purposefully toward the main entrance. His bearing and decorations immediately identified him as a high-ranking officer, though his presence at a small-town nursing home seemed completely incongruous. The officer introduced himself to Dr. Thompson as Lieutenant Colonel James Miller and inquired about Eleanor Mitchell's funeral arrangements with a formality that suggested official business rather than personal condolences. Eleanor was a very special individual, he explained to the bewildered facility director. There are people who need to pay their respects. We'd like to coordinate with your planned service, if that's acceptable. Before Dr. Thompson could fully process this request or ask the obvious questions, the sound of multiple vehicles arriving drew their attention to the windows overlooking the parking area. A convoy of military vehicles was pulling into the nursing home's modest parking lot and lining up along the adjacent street. The procession included 2 olive green Jeeps, 3 larger military transport trucks, an armored personnel carrier, and several unmarked black sedans that screamed federal government. Uniformed personnel began emerging from these vehicles and forming precise formations, their movements coordinated with military efficiency. Dr. Thompson watched in stunned disbelief as what had been planned as a simple private funeral transformed into something resembling a state ceremony. The number of military personnel continued to grow as additional vehicles arrived. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, all in dress uniforms, created orderly ranks in the nursing home's front yard. Many wore decorations and insignia, indicating significant experience and high security clearances. The sight of such an assembly in the quiet Virginia town was unprecedented, and curious residents of the surrounding neighborhood began gathering at respectful distances to observe the unprecedented spectacle. At approximately 9 a.m., the distinct sound of approaching helicopters drew everyone's attention skyward. 2 military helicopters circled the area once before landing in a field adjacent to the nursing home property. The lead aircraft bore markings indicating it carried high-ranking officials, while the second appeared to be a security escort. As the rotors wound down, a small group of individuals in military uniforms disembarked and walked toward the growing assembly with the confident bearing of people accustomed to command. The senior officer who emerged from the lead helicopter was immediately recognizable to the military personnel present, though his identity meant nothing to the nursing home staff. General Robert Anderson, a distinguished veteran with graying temples and a chest full of combat decorations, approached Eleanor's simple wooden casket with a reverence that seemed almost spiritual. He stood at attention and rendered a perfect military salute, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air as he spoke. "Commander Eleanor, you're finally going home where you belong." Nurse Sarah, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was unfolding around Eleanor's funeral, suddenly remembered the key that the deceased woman had pressed into her palm weeks earlier. Fighting through the crowd of military personnel and curious onlookers, she made her way back into the nursing home and up to Eleanor's now empty room. Her hands trembled slightly as she retrieved the metal box from its hiding place and inserted the key into the combination lock, which opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through the quiet room. The contents of the box were both extraordinary and deeply moving. Military medals and decorations filled one section, including several that Sarah recognized as being among the highest honors that could be awarded to military personnel. There was a pilot's license with certifications for multiple aircraft types, including some that Sarah suspected might be classified. Dozens of photographs showed a younger Eleanor in various international locations, standing beside different aircraft, and posed with groups of serious-looking men and women in military uniforms. Official documents bearing heavy censorship marks and security classifications filled another section of the box. Mission reports, commendation letters, and training certificates painted a picture of a career that had encompassed far more than the simple government work that Eleanor had claimed. At the bottom of the box, wrapped carefully in protective plastic, was a handwritten letter in Eleanor's distinctive script, apparently composed specifically for whoever would eventually discover these materials. The letter read, "My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I had the honor of serving as a pilot and intelligence operative with the United States Air Force for more than 20 years. During the Cold War, I participated in reconnaissance missions and covert operations that I cannot describe in detail even now. After my official retirement in 1995, I was advised to maintain a low profile for security reasons, as some of my work involved sensitive international relationships that could potentially place me at risk if my identity became public knowledge. I chose to live quietly at Sunset Gardens, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because anonymity felt like a luxury after decades of living under constant scrutiny and security protocols. I never forgot the honor of serving my country, and I hope that my contributions, however small, made some difference in preserving the freedoms that we all cherish. If you are reading this letter, it means that my story can finally be told. Please remember me not as a mysterious old woman, but as someone who believed deeply in service, sacrifice, and the ideals that make America worth defending. Sarah read the letter twice before the full implications of its contents began to register. She grabbed the box and its contents and ran downstairs to find General Anderson, who was conferring with other senior officers about the ceremony logistics. When she showed him the letter and some of the photographs, the general's composure cracked slightly, and his eyes filled with unshed tears. Eleanor Mitchell was one of the finest officers I ever had the privilege of serving with, he said quietly. She saved more lives and prevented more international incidents than most people will ever know. And now, finally, she can receive the recognition she always deserved. The funeral ceremony that followed was unlike anything the small Virginia town had ever witnessed. More than 200 military personnel from all branches of service participated in a full honors ceremony that lasted nearly 2 hours. Eleanor's casket was draped with an American flag and carried by an honor guard composed of pilots from her former squadron. A military band played hymns and patriotic songs, while a 21-gun salute echoed across the countryside. General Anderson delivered a eulogy that provided carefully worded details about Eleanor's service record, describing her as a distinguished pilot and intelligence operative whose contributions to national security during some of our country's most challenging periods helped preserve the peace that we often take for granted. He spoke of her courage in undertaking missions that required not only exceptional flying skills, but also the ability to operate independently in hostile environments, where capture would have meant certain death. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of Eleanor's final medal, a presidential unit citation that had been authorized, but never formally presented due to the classified nature of her service. General Anderson pinned the decoration to a memorial wreath that would be placed on her grave, saying, "Eleanor Mitchell served her country with distinction, honor, and complete selflessness. She asked for no recognition, sought no glory, and accepted the burden of anonymity as willingly as she accepted every other aspect of her duty. Today, we finally have the opportunity to say what should have been said years ago. Thank you, Commander Mitchell. Well done." After the ceremony, Eleanor's remains were transported to Arlington National Cemetery, where she was interred with full military honors in a section reserved for personnel whose service had involved the highest levels of security clearance. Her gravestone, made of white marble and bearing the Air Force insignia, simply read, "Eleanor Mitchell, Commander, United States Air Force, 1955-2023. She served her country with honor and courage." Dr. Thompson spent the weeks following Eleanor's funeral in a state of continued amazement about the woman who had lived so quietly among them for 15 years. "We had a genuine American hero in our facility," he told reporters who called seeking information about Eleanor's story. "She never complained, never asked for special treatment, never mentioned her background. She was just present and kind and dignified. If I had known who she really was, I would have treated her differently, but I think she would have been horrified by that idea." Nurse Sarah transformed Eleanor's former room into an informal memorial space, with permission from the nursing home's administration. She displayed some of Eleanor's photographs and medals, along with informational materials about women in military aviation and the role of classified operations during the Cold War. The room became a popular destination for visitors who wanted to learn about Eleanor's story and pay their respects to her memory. The media attention that followed Eleanor's funeral brought national recognition to her story and sparked broader conversations about the veterans who lived quietly in communities across America, their service records unknown to those around them. Documentary filmmakers, military historians, and veteran advocacy groups all expressed interest in preserving Eleanor's story as part of the historical record, though much of her operational history remained classified and would likely never be fully disclosed. Frank Martinez, the Army veteran who had sensed something familiar in Eleanor's demeanor, became an unofficial spokesman for the nursing home's effort to honor her memory. "She taught all of us something important," he said during a television interview. "You never know what someone has been through, what they've sacrificed, what they've contributed to your freedom and safety." Eleanor could have told us war stories, could have impressed us with tales of adventure and danger. Instead, she chose to live simply and quietly, finding dignity in ordinary things. That's a lesson we all need to remember. The nursing home staff's perspective on their work changed significantly after learning about Eleanor's background. They began approaching all of their residents with greater curiosity and respect, understanding that each person carried a lifetime of experiences that might include extraordinary service, sacrifice, or achievement. Dr. Thompson instituted a program encouraging residents to share their life stories, resulting in the discovery of several other veterans whose service had gone unrecognized, as well as former teachers, business leaders, and community volunteers whose contributions had shaped their local communities in important ways. Eleanor Mitchell's story became part of the curriculum at the Air Force Academy and other military educational institutions, used as an example of the commitment and sacrifice that characterized service members who operated in classified roles during the Cold War. Her life demonstrated that true heroism often went unrecognized during a person's lifetime, and that the most significant contributions to national security were frequently made by individuals whose names would never appear in conventional history books. The impact of Eleanor's story extended beyond military circles to influence how communities across America thought about and treated their elderly residents. Nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and senior centers began implementing programs designed to honor and preserve the stories of their residents, recognizing that these institutions housed libraries of human experience that deserved preservation and respect. Perhaps most importantly, Eleanor's story served as a reminder that ordinary interactions with seemingly ordinary people might actually involve encounters with individuals who had shaped history in ways that would never be fully known or appreciated. Her 15 years at Sunset Gardens demonstrated that dignity, service, and quiet heroism could be found in the most unexpected places, and that the true measure of a person's worth was not their public recognition, but their character and the positive impact they had on the world around them. The memorial room in Eleanor's honor continued to receive visitors for years after her death, becoming a pilgrimage site for military personnel, aviation enthusiasts, and people inspired by her story of service and sacrifice. The simple nursing home room, with its basic furnishings and modest decorations, served as a powerful reminder that extraordinary lives often unfold in ordinary settings, and that the greatest heroes might be the ones sitting quietly in the corner, asking for nothing more than the chance to live their final years with dignity and peace.